Good evening, and welcome to this evening's study session. Agendas for sessions, including concept reviews, can be found visiting Broomfield's website at broomfield.org. Our agenda this evening includes 3 study session items. Seeing there are no concept reviews on the agenda this evening, there will not be any public comment. You can watch the study session live on Channel 8 and through video streaming on Broomfield's website, broomfield.org/council meetings. For our hard of hearing residents present, we have wireless headsets available in the back of the council chambers from our AV team. Our first item this evening is an update from staff on the status of the utility enterprise funds. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, and I'll ask our staff to begin the discussion.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, council and community. Graham Clark is going to kick us off. He's the Director of Finance, and Ken Rutt is here along with AECom. We're going to tag team it today, but the opening chapter is going to be delivered by Mr. Graham.
Thank you, Manager Hoffman. Mayor Pro Tem, council members, Graham Clark, Director of Finance. Next slide. Okay, tonight from a high-level finance perspective, we'll be discussing some key items. One of which is the high precipitation that Broomfield has experienced so far this year. We'll also discuss the development fees, bond timing, fund financials, and lastly, we will discuss future direction needed from council as we continue to focus on a well-managed financial plan going forward. Next slide. Water usage for Broomfield in 2024 resulted in close to the highest overall usage for a given year. In 2024, revenue came in on target. In 2025, we've seen slightly higher year-over-year consumption in Q1. However, we have seen a large decrease in Q2. May was down 12% from 2024, and June was down 27% from 2024. Overall, year-over-year through June, consumption is down by 12%, driven primarily by substantial rainfall in June. This provides challenges in that although conservation is good, the usage revenues are low for this time of year. A couple of years ago, this would have been troubling to the water fund. However, because we changed the structure last year to focus more on base fees, we are in a better position to withstand this volatility in usage. Next slide. Shifting to development fees, over the last few years, actual residential water and sewer permits have come in lower than budget. For 2025, through halfway through the year, we're slightly lower than anticipated in development fees. We will continue to monitor this the second part of the year, and will adjust revenues in Amendment 3 if necessary. However, it's a little bit too early to tell right now. We do get good monthly updates from planning, who stay on top of and stay up to date on all Broomfield's development. Next slide. Next, we wanted to provide an update on the URAF program. The program has completed 6 months now. Housing staff continue to be very helpful to the many residents that have come in. So far, they've processed over 1,600 applications, and over 1,300 residents have been approved. That represents about 11% of those under the 100% AMI criteria. The utility billing staff is busy crediting resident bills on a weekly basis. And we do anticipate the URAF assistance combined with the personnel cost to be in the $400,000 to $600,000 range by the end of the year. We anticipate more applications before the deadline of September 30th of this year. Next slide. As a review, Broomfield will be issuing 2 enterprise bonds in the next 6 months. We have met with our bond counsel and recently have begun the documentation and paperwork to prepare for issuing bonds in early 2026. It was deemed that mid-January is the best time for CCOB to issue due to the demand that investors have at that time, coming right off the holidays. We are positioned well on many of the primary factors considered by rating agencies, and we do anticipate a good rating, which will happen towards the end of the year, probably early December. We issued an RFP in June to secure underwriters for the enterprise bonds, and we'll be making a decision on which firm we use later this month in the next couple weeks. Next slide. Here's a visual of the bonds within CCOB. You can see the enterprise funds are in blue and green there. We do plan to have our financial advisors, RBC, come and discuss more on bond details in the next quarterly meeting or around the time of the budget, sometime this fall. Next slide. At the last quarterly update, council directed staff to move forward with forming an advisory committee with 7 members and no alternates. The purpose and duties of the committee, called FLOW, is to provide suggestions and recommendations to City Council and CCOB staff related to utility enterprise fees and CIP planning. We now have a committee of 7 members, and we've had 2 preliminary meetings so far. These have been more educational in nature, and our first official meeting is coming up on August 7th. The group is engaged and knowledgeable about enterprise-related items, and it is staff's goal to introduce the draft budget and CIP plans to the committee in the next meeting in August. However, it's important to note that the timing will not allow committee members to give feedback to significantly influence the 2026 budget, and that will be almost done by that point. Next slide. I'm now going to turn it over to Ken to provide further updates.
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, City Managers. Thank you for the opportunity to come and share some more enterprise updates with you tonight, and we're excited to be here and share. Just to follow up a little bit on the FLOW, we are also providing tours for the FLOW members. So last night we did the tour of the water treatment facility, and we'll have one on the wastewater facility coming up here in about 2 weeks. So it's been a wonderful process. So next slide. So one of the major events that took place this last quarter is the Public Works and Water Utilities Academy sessions. So we had between May 17th and July 9th, we hosted 7 different academies in which there was a little over 70 people, residents within Broomfield, that attended the various sessions. And it was very engaging to the staff in the community as we were able to walk around in various demonstrations, and they got to see firsthand what it would take to repair a water line, what it takes to check out a TVA sewer line, walk through the treatment plants and so forth. So it was a very good opportunity for staff, I think, in the community, as we've heard from several residents. Next slide. Here's a few photos from the various events that we had, from the laboratories and the wastewater facility to some of the demonstrations out in the parking lot and some of the tours, and even the energy and environment guys demonstrated how they test and read for the various air contaminants that they check for. So it was well attended. Next slide. So one of the items that we wanted to make sure we touched on tonight was Chimney Hollow Reservoir and its current status. As you know, it is located just west of Carter Lake, and it will store about 90,000 acre-feet of Windy Gap water. Broomfield is the largest participant. We have 29.4% of the storage volume, or roughly a little over 26,464 acre-feet of water. The dam testing and the first fill of the reservoir is scheduled to start later this summer and continue through 2027. And as you know, Windy Gap water is very critical and to Broomfield to allow us to fully utilize the Windy Gap water and to meet our efficiency goals and long-term water demands. Without this firm water supply provided by Chimney Hollow, we were unable to meet our projected water demands for both potable and reuse in the future. Next slide. So as Northern Water has published that during the building of the Chimney Hollow Reservoir and due to some rainfall, what has occurred is some naturally occurring uranium has been found. The minimized uranium was detected in water samples that was behind the coffer dam. The coffer dam was built to stop any moisture, rainfall, and so forth to protect the dam while it was under construction. And as that water's been retained behind that dam, that coffer dam, there's been some leaching of uranium. It's important to note that this is from granite, comes from the granite that was being mined in that area for part of the quarry. And it is also natural occurring in a lot of locations in Colorado versus the various formations of rock that we have in the state. The ongoing monitoring of the water quality at the reservoir is our current status, is that Northern and both of the Northern Water, along with the 16 participants and the 2 engineering firms, which is Black & Veatch and Stantec, are continuing to monitor the water quality and evaluate what is the options to move forward. It's important to note that not only us as Broomfield engaged, but also the other 15 participants are highly engaged with Northern Water, and we're evaluating the characteristics or characterizing the water and what strategies we need to use to move forward. It's also important to note that no water will be delivered from Chimney Hollow Reservoir until the assessments are completed. A plan has been developed to ensure safe raw water supply. So, next slide. So just to, I guess make sure everybody understands that yes, Chimney Hollow is still going to be used for a water supply source. We do not anticipate that to change. Yes, this was initial discovery was a little bit of a setback to the initial plans. We are continuing to take samples. We're continuing to build the profile to understand the source and the concentrations. It's also important to understand for everybody that uranium is one of the water quality standards that the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment does regulate under the Colorado Primary Drinking Water Regulations. The maximum level for uranium in drinking water is 30 parts per billion. And that from the management of the uranium from the public health perspective is that water supply is one of the long-term exposures through ingestion. And it's not radioactive. It's not a radioactive risk. And so more to come on that as we know more. We have follow-up meetings in August and some additional data we are expecting by October. Next slide. The other key pieces are the Northern Area water storage tanks. We are scheduled to present to Council in December after the adoption of the 2026 budget bond ordinance to issue the GMP with the contractor. The reason we're waiting until December and don't know that yet is right now, suppliers and contractors are not holding prices for longer than 90 days. And so we want to make sure that we are within that 90-day window from the time we present it to you until the time we start construction so that there's no cost escalation from the time we present it to you. And we expect it take about 24 to 30 months to complete this water project. The Mesa Booster Station, that has been completed. We are in the process of closing out that project. The system is operating and functioning as designed. The Mesa Booster Station is designed to help with water pressure, water supply, fire flows to like areas like the Broomfield Detention Center, the former Lubrin corporate office, Rocky Mountain Airport, Skystone, and the Verb developments. Next slide. The water meter replacement program is kicking off. As you remember, we are replacing the current 12-year life meters with new ultrasonic technology that will last up to 20 years, which will help in the long-range process of our asset management. The 12-year program currently is about $13.5 million to complete. And in the 25 program, it is $832,249. And year to date, we have installed 1,065 of those meters. A crew of four is doing about 76 meters a week. So they are really working through them pretty quickly. So we're on track to wrap this up by the end of September to be done with that. Water line replacement projects updates. Next slide, please. Is Westlake Community Water Line Replacement. We're about 67% complete with this project. We are replacing 4,900 feet of water line that was installed in 1974. It extends from Westlake Drive to South Princess Circle to Grove Way on West 134th Avenue or Place. So like I said, we're about 3,300 feet of that 4,900 feet. And then the other water line replacements on 136th. One of the first things we'll do is replace the PRV valve that's in Lowell and 136th. That helps control pressures on the system in that area. It's expected to be done by September of 25. And then we're slip lining the 3,720 feet of 16-inch pipe that's extending from Red Deer Trail eastward to Lowell Boulevard. That's expected to start in late July or early August. Next slide. The sewer collection and lift stations. The 2025 sewer collection rehab program uses the cure-in-place lining technology. The Midway Park is about 4,540 linear feet from Highway 287 to Main Street, and construction started on that project in June 23rd, so just a few weeks ago, and it's scheduled for completion by late August. The second part is the manhole rehab projects, which was focused on structural lining of 35 different manholes along 120th from Chase Street to Perry Street, and construction started on that on April 21st. And we are expecting completion by the end of July of that project. Sewer lift station, the Sunridge lift station. We've met with the HOA board in May for approval of the permanent easement. The board did not approve the easement at that point. They had some questions and wanted to revisit a couple of items of the need to relocate a permanent easement. And we're going to meet with the board again at their August 26th meeting. We're answering some of their questions that they had, and then we'll be hopefully moving forward with that project in August. The Outlook lift station, the design kicked off on May 22nd, and the design will take about 18 months to complete. Next slide. Stormwater system programs. The 25 stormwater collection rehab program addresses 4 primary areas: Miramonte Park area, Lacamore area, the Northmore area, and the Broomfield Plaza area. The first part will be in Miramonte Park. That's set to begin at the end of August, and it should take about 2 weeks to complete that. And then we'll move over to Lacamora to start about the mid-September area, and again, that'll take about 2 weeks. And then we'll move over to the Northmore area east of 7th Avenue, East 7th Avenue area, and that'll start in about the early October, which should take about 1 week for that one. And then the Broomfield Plaza area will be starting around the mid of October, and it'll take 1 week. And then the pond management program surveys. We're contracted with 2 different companies to assist with surveying and evaluation of our stormwater ponds. Solitude Lake Management is conducting sediment surveys on 17 ponds now, and we'll be adding 14 more by the end of the year. And then Icon Engineering is conducting a comprehensive pond assessment between July 11th and August 1st on additional 8 ponds. And then we've also installed 2 LG Sonic algae control systems, one at the trails at Westlake Pond and the other one in Sager Reservoir. We also use these LG Sonics at the Sienna Reservoir. We have 2 of them in Sienna Reservoir to help control algae. We also have one at Glasser Reservoir at the water treatment plant. We installed the first one in Glasser last summer, and we noticed significant reduction in algae in our raw water coming into the plant. And so we're excited to see the improvements in these ponds.
Where's the Sagar Reservoir?
That one is right off of the Broadlands Golf Course. Next slide. The water recovery facility. We are moving forward with the phase 1 project. It is been completely designed, was submitted to the Colorado Department of Public Health and has received the construction approval, which is called a site application, that has been received from the state. So that is one of the key factors before we even present it to you for contract award, is to make sure that the state is okay with us building it. So we have that approval from the state. The phase 1 projects, we are planning to execute in 2 distinct packages. The first one will be the early work package, which has been identified in the available 2025 budget funds. This is critical for procuring our key long range and long lead equipment, such as variable drive, frequency drives, some of the pumps, the electrical equipment, some of the blowers, generators, and initiate some of the construction. Some of these items can take up to 18 months to receive, so getting them procured early in the process is critical to stay on schedule. This will allow us, like I said, for our work to start in after the bonds are funding in early 2026. And then the late work package is that this package will be presented to council in late 2025. So I should back up. First package, we're scheduled in July 22nd, I believe, is the council memo where we'll be presenting the early work package. And then following that, the late package will come after the 2026 budget approval. And we're thinking that will come in around December. Key drivers for the cost of key drivers for the cost include capacity, asset renewal, the biosolids, reuse, and regulatory requirements. Next slide. And then provide you an update with Great Western Reservoir. Just a quick overview. Again, the reservoir was originally built in 1904. It serves as a primary storage now for our reuse water system. There's 3 major structural issues that we are working through, which is failing tow drains that go through the dam, aging outlet pipe, and lingering structural deficiencies in the embankments. Currently, the state engineer has rated it conditionally satisfactory, which requires us to continue making progress on identifying and making improvements to these outlets by 2030. There's 3 potential alternatives that identified by our engineering firm, Snopples Incorporated, which is selective replacement of the tow drain and outlet, the full dam replacement, and then the final one, which would be breach and decommission the dam, which would not be our recommendation. The activities done to date is we have, next slide, please. We have completed 20 sediment samples, or at least the engineering firm conducted 20 sediment samples tested for contamination. And the preliminary risk modeling from the results of those samplings determined that if any of the construction alternatives, the purpose was to determine if there was any alternatives that could pose a threat to the community health. The results showed that the concentration of radionuclides are consistent with the historical recorded background levels. The preliminary risk modeling showed that the potential radiation exposure for on-site construction workers, nearby residents would be indistinguishable from typical background levels in Colorado. And additional sampling and risk modeling will be completed once the repair option is determined. So once we determine which repair option, 1 or 2, we'll do some additional sampling verifying the initial sampling results. So the next phase is to complete a reuse system assessment to update and refine the modeling of our reuse storage and distribution system. We'll evaluate the impacts to both the reuse and potable water systems based on the 3 potential alternatives. We've also will be identifying vulnerabilities, model potential scenarios, develop target solutions, and recommend a path forward. We have met with 2 engineering firms today to discuss the approaches and begun to drafting the scope of work. We expect to issue the request for proposals by September for this work. Staff anticipates bringing council the recommendations following the completion of this modeling and study by early 2027. Next slide. Couple of things that we have done over the last quarter is a couple of tabletop exercises with working with the Colorado Department of Public Health training folks that we went over a waterline break tabletop exercise on January 13th, which the training focused on waterline breaks that all facilities face around Tier 1 violations. A Tier 1 violation usually results in a boil water odor. So it's one of the more serious events. So the exercise demonstrated that Broomfield has a very high level of preparedness in our water supply network. This is attributed to redundancy, some system looping, and section isolation. So that's why it's important for us to continue to provide as a replacement of these facilities, this infrastructure, the valves, the PRVs, that's all part of that redundancy. Then the Broomfield's distribution system benefits from interconnects. We also have interconnects with Denver Water and the city of Westminster, which enables us to have multiple water sources during emergencies. And then the City and County of Broomfield standard and specs also mandate looping in all new developments, which effectively eliminates single feeds. And that's a critical point in keeping the redundancy in our system. And then we also place shutoff valves, typically every 500 to 1,000 feet, which facilitates our ability to isolate sections without causing disruptions to the rest of the system. Next slide. The other tabletop exercise was a wildfire tabletop. We did that one on May 30th. And this one evaluated our response and coordination efforts. The key focus areas included maintaining essential services, establishing clear evacuation protocols, and ensuring effective initial emergency response procedures. It was emphasizing activating critical communication channels, including the 911 system and department operational dispatch centers, prioritizing resources appropriately and responding decisively when critical infrastructure is threatened. Some of the major themes was managing, obviously, the communication complexity and balancing the public safety as we move forward. Also identifying the operational needs of essential facilities. So, and then the other focus part was maintaining clear communications between the water distribution teams and the plant operations, and also dispatch with PD and other appropriate personnel. We also have identified the ability during critical situations that, in part, that some of the operations of the water treatment plants and the water tanks are also available to us to operate remotely if needed. So that helps with staff safety also. Next slide. As we said last time, we have several measures in place as we have already, a lot of the works that we have been gone into for preparedness of wildfires. Obviously, we have the emergency diesel power generator at all of our facilities, water and wastewater facilities, which is really critical because Xcel tends to shut off the natural gas when there's a fire. And therefore, if you have natural gas generators, you don't have backup power. So we do use diesel generators. We also participate in the Colorado Mutual Aid Agreement through the Water and Wastewater Agency Response Network. We also have the interconnects that we talked about with Denver and the city of Westminster. And really, we operational policies and procedures to make sure that we are topping off our finished water storage in anticipation of any actual approaching fire, power loss, or distribution damage. We also maintain 2 different laboratories at 2 different locations that would also provide additional water testing during emergency. So next slide. Water storage analysis. We have completed a water storage analysis with the Becky property, which is located in the Weld County area of Erie. I think about Highway 52 and about Weld County Road 1. Broomfield originally purchased the Becky property in 2000. We acquired 132 acres and the associated water rights, and we paid $3,725,000 back then. The purchase included 254 Colorado Big Thompson units of water, which was the main value behind the purchasing of the land. The CBT units, if we had to buy them today, are valued at $17,780,000. So just 25 years later, huge increase in the cost of that water. We did a recent appraisal value, the property and the reclaiming the water rights. The property is about 1.8 million as is for a buyer, and assuming the permitting and gravel recovery risks. And if Broomfield allows for a longer due diligence period for gravel permitting, the estimate sale price would increase to 2.5 million to 3.7 million. We have 3 potential buyers who have expressed interest, which includes the town of Erie has previously sought a first right of refusal back in 2019. Staff has met with the town of Erie a couple of times, and my understanding is that they are presenting to their council a possible offer for the property. The proceeds from the sale would be aligned to help fund the repair at the Great Western Reservoir. Next slide. And one of the, you'll hear a little bit more following this slide from AECom, but just generally speaking, our asset management program has continued to develop and expand. And in October 2024, AECom presented the recommendations to council, proposing additional funding to address the state of good repairs and our backlog and improve our Broomfield system. It was suggested that water assets require at least $6 million annually and sewer assets needed between $8 to $10 million per year. And this might be a little bit of the spoiler of their presentation, but the 2025 phase 2 project report has been completed, and we used AECom refined the method for prioritizing the infrastructure renewal and replacement needs by the additional consideration of risk-based factors. And the findings and conclusions confirmed the recommended $6 million annually for the water assets. And we split the difference, and it came in at $9 million for the sewer and stormwater assets. So with that, I will turn the mic over to AECom, and they will present some more information on that 25.
Thank you, Mr. Rutt.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, City Manager. Thank you for having us back again. My name is Bridget Malinowski. I am the Asset Management Practice Lead for AECom. I have with me today Dr. Bob Peskin. He is our economic financial person. You met him before when we were here last time to present to you. And then Mark Forgang is our technical specialist in both water and software modeling technology. So next slide is just a quick little agenda of what we're going to go through. I do want to say thank you to you guys for all the questions that you and your residents had the last time we were here. What we've done over this year is really go into some more granularity on your assets and really pull more information in there, bring some reliability, and Bob's going to go through that for you here in a moment. The next slide is just kind of the objective of what our current analysis is. We reported to you guys back in 2024, like Ken said, giving those the prioritized infrastructure renewal needs, really going through what some of those different funding scenarios are. And as you heard from him, I mean, it's okay to give you a spoiler. We don't, right? Like they teach you in school where you summarize at the end. We start with the summarize because it's really good for you to hear that, because then you can really base everything else you're hearing from all the supporting information later. The second analysis introduces risk and operating costs. A couple of the key things that I just want to remind you is that it does not account, these numbers don't include growth or expansion. Growth is more when you're adding in new residents or new communities where you're adding that into that. And the expansion is more when we're using more water or that for the existing communities that you have. So it's just replace in kind, replace what is there with what isn't, what you have. The other interesting thing was we've expanded the inventory, and this isn't meaning that you've grown in the inventory from what we had last year. It's just this is what you typically do when you're doing modeling and when you're doing implementing asset management systems. You really start at that high level, and the more you work with it, the more granular you get. So one of the interesting facts is we went from 98,000 line items last year to this year we're at over 63,000 line items. So really what that is working with the Broomfield staff. So we appreciate your staff working with us, giving us a lot of information, doing Google Street Views, looking at how we can improve the data quality that we've got there. So that's just kind of a high level. Bob is going to go into some more detail. And again, we appreciate you taking the time and having us back.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm Bob Peskin with AECom. Next slide. Wanted to review briefly the enhanced analysis that we went through, the structure of the analysis. This is an animated slide, so I'll just say, yeah, all right. So the analytical tool that we use to prioritize investment addresses four fundamental components of a priority score, which is represented by the pie chart on the left. In our original analysis, we based all of the prioritization, that is, what do we spend money on within a constrained budget? It was based entirely on age and condition. In this new analysis, click one more time, please. We bring into consideration, as Ken mentioned earlier, considerations of risk and considerations of the maintenance costs in the operating budget, what we're calling operating costs. The age and condition component is based on a set of asset decay curves that look at age versus condition of assets. The risk rating looks at another set of decay curves, looking at age versus probability of failure. And the measure of risk, and this is really a global standard, is the probability of failure times the consequence of failure. And the consequence of failure in this case is the number of households affected. And we have an estimate associated with that of the duration of failure depending on the type of asset. What we're calling here the benefit cost rating is just looking effectively at the ratio of what's the cost to continue to operate an old asset as opposed to operating a new asset. The reason for considering all these factors is we're trying in this analytical tool to emulate what the actual decision-making would be, looking at the assets year by year over a relatively long-term period, over a 20-year analysis period. We did not address a strategic goals rating because that really didn't exist in this context. We've applied it for other asset owners in other contexts, typically addressing regulatory demands or climate change vulnerability, but we didn't do it in this case. So that's the decision-making that's going on within the tool. It's how it's prioritizing within a constrained budget. And everything that we looked at was in the context of a constrained budget. Next slide. Oh, all right, so next I want to talk about how we measure the performance of the assets. How do we know if we're funding enough in the Public Works program? There's two sets of measures that we consider. We consider a set of performance measures and a set of spending measures. These are the performance measures, and I arranged them in this order because you're going to see them in this order in the graphs, and I'll define each of them. And note that in addition to the narrative description, I also give a little hint about whether a larger number is better or a larger number is worse. And I'll get it to that in the subsequent slides. So let's go one more slide. So here we're just talking about the backlog and the condition scores as two of the performance measures. I'm showing examples of the graphs that you'll see later. So the backlog is the dollar value of assets that are beyond their useful life. We want that to be as low as possible. And we have a graph on the right, which shows that this happens to be a high funding level. So we spend money fast enough and we get rid of the backlog. And in this particular scenario, it stays at zero. The condition is measured on a 5-to-1 scale, which we typically use in this tool, where 5 is new and 1 is worn. It's not unsafe, it's just getting unreliable and relatively expensive to maintain. And we see an example of what that type of graph looks like. So the top measure, better, is a lower value. The bottom measure, a better measure, is a high value. Next slide, please. These are the other two performance measures where we measure reliability in terms of annual failures per 100 miles of pipe. And we see an example of that where there's generally there's an upward trend because these are relatively long-lived assets. We're looking at a relatively small portion of their lives, and generally the assets just continue to age. They're still within their useful life, most of them. We're making a relatively small investment relative to the overall value of the assets. And then the bottom graph is the percentage of assets that are, quote, at a state of good repair. That is the percentage of assets that are within their useful life. When the backlog is zero, all the assets are within their useful life. So you will recall from the prior slide, we had 2 years where there was a backlog. And in those 2 years, the percentage of assets at a state of good repair is slightly less than 100%. In the years where there was no backlog, they're all at a state of good repair. The line's at 100%. So those are the performance measures: backlog, reliability, condition of the assets, and percentage of assets at a state of good repair. Next, we'll talk about the spending measures. That's the next slide. And again, the arrangement of them on the screen, you'll see when I show the results of some of the actual scenarios. And again, 4 measures that I'll talk about on the next 2 slides. And in the case of the spending measures, lower values generally are better. Next slide. We measure the annual spending. So we see the distribution of the spending, in this case, the split between utilities and facilities. This is a water example. So we see down toward the latter few years of the analysis period, big investment in facilities. And we see the annual operating the annual sum of operating costs and capital costs. Next slide. The annual operating costs is the top graph, And in this case, we see that the operating costs are continuing to grow over time, which is to be expected. These are long-lived assets that are just continuing to age over time. And in general, the older the asset, the more expensive they are for maintenance costs in the operating budget. That little drop that we see, and this is kind of revealing what's coming, but that drop is the result of investment in the water treatment plant. So we have an introduction, we're replacing old assets with new assets, and that results in a reduction in the cost for facilities costs, the brown bars in this graph. And then finally, the cumulative capital and operating costs. And what we would be hoping for is to see that as we spend more capital money, that the sum of capital and operating declines. And I'll reveal part of the overall finding here is that generally we're not finding that to be the case. Generally, if we spend more money on capital, we're spending more money, capital and operating. But the benefit of spending more money on capital is the performance of the assets improves. The backlog goes down, reliability improves, condition improves. Next slide. Wanted to reinforce the two sets of analyses that we did. We looked at utilities and we looked at combined sewer and stormwater. And this was a continuation of the analytical structure that we presented to you back in September. Utilities are generally pipe assets, water distribution, sewer collection. Facilities are point assets, buildings, treatment plants, pump and lift stations. Next slide. We looked at 3 funding scenarios for water and 3 funding scenarios for sewer. In all of those, the way that we picked the scenarios was to look at the big changes in asset performance, looking at what happened to backlog, to condition, to reliability, and one spending measure looking at what's happening in the operating costs. So you can see the objectives that we were looking at. And as Ken mentioned, the high funding scenarios were $6 million a year for water and $9 million a year for sewer and stormwater. I would again emphasize, as Bridget mentioned just before me, that that these spending levels were modeling for replacement of existing assets in kind. We're not addressing expansion or any other improvements to the existing assets. Next slide. Another way to look at the spending levels was to compare them to what the future needs are going to be. So we have an option in running the tool, the analytical tool, of running it without a spending constraint. So if money fell from heaven, here's how fast we would have to spend the money to address all of the needs on time. And there are some peaks in here, and you can see the, in this case, for water on the left and storm and sewer on the right, you can see the various spending measures. Note that the scale of the graphs is different. Graph on the left is the top is 14 million a year, and the graph on the right is 16 million a year. So the bars are the unconstrained needs, the dotted lines are the various funding scenarios that we looked at. So a high funding scenario and then 2 lower funding scenarios. Next slide. We also compared this to what the current projected spending is for existing assets, replacing them in kind. And the bars here were provided by Ken and his staff. And we compare that to the spending levels that we modeled. For water, the bars are what's in the capital program for existing assets, the blue bars, and you can see where the 6 million a year line falls, generally consistent with what's in the capital program, which is somewhat dominated by utility expenditures. For the storm and sewer stormwater and sewer line, there's a little bit of a gap between the projected spending, which is largely for utilities, and the cost for facilities. And the facilities costs essentially make up the difference between the orange bars and the orange dotted line. Next slide. All right, so now I'm going to show the results of the analysis. First for water assets, then for sewer and stormwater assets. Next slide. So this combines all three funding scenarios for water into a single slide. We've got three of the performance measures on the top graphs, backlog and reliability, and on the bottom row, the average condition. And then I have one of the spending measures, the annual operating and maintenance costs. That is maintenance costs that are in the operating budget. The red line is the lowest spending. The green line is the highest spending. So what do we see here? For backlog, if we funded $6 million a year, the backlog goes away within 2 years and it stays away. And the same thing happens at $5 million a year. But at $3 million a year, and again, this is for water assets, in almost every year we have a backlog. And toward the end of the analysis period, the backlog really grows. The reason for that is there's not enough money being spent to pay for investment in the water treatment facility. So we get this big jump toward the end. The reliability line shows that except for a couple of years, about 2/3 the way through the analysis period, the lines are just about the same. So reliability doesn't really distinguish that much among the funding scenarios, except in that about 4-year period from 35 to 39. In terms of the condition scores, not much difference. And this is not really a surprise because, again, we're talking about long-lived assets. We're looking at a relatively small portion of their useful lives. Not much of a difference, except right toward the very end of the analysis period when the higher funding scenario pays for the water treatment plant, whereas the lower funding scenarios do not. And as a result, we see a continuing slide in the red line and this slight improvement with the green line, which is where there's adequate investment in the water treatment facility. And the converse is true in terms of operating costs, that the lines are overlapping until we get to the years when the investment in the water treatment plant is needed and operating costs go down in the year that we're able to make the investment, which happens with the higher funding scenario. So those are the overall view of the water assets in the three scenarios. And then very quickly, I'll show you the actual results for each scenario. Next slide, please. Next slide. So this is the highest funding scenario, $6 million a year. The backlog goes away after 2 years. We see the trend in reliability with that little dip happening right in the middle. The average condition score, what's really improving is the brown facilities line. That's because of the investment in the wastewater, in the water treatment plant. And we see that 100% of the assets are at a state of good repair in the years that the backlog is zero. Now, as we take money away, go to the next slide, we see that we get this backlog toward the end of the analysis period where we haven't paid for all of the water treatment plant. And that kind of drives all the other results that we're seeing. And then if we take even more money away, we see, and go to the next slide, please. We see a backlog almost throughout the analysis period, a resulting worsening of reliability. Again, on the reliability curve in the upper right, a higher number is worse. We see in the lower left graph that the condition for facilities gets much worse as we take money away. And again, the percentage of assets at a state of good repair declines because we haven't been able to make the investment on time in the water treatment facility. Okay, so that's the summary of the water assets. Next slide. Now we'll talk about, whoops, that should say sewer and stormwater assets. I'm sorry, I take that back. I got confused. Now we're going to talk about the water assets, the spending measures, again, one scenario at a time. So here's the spending at the highest level, and we see capital spending occurring, throughout, with this big jump occurring in 2042, which is the investment in the water treatment plant. We see a reduction in the operating costs occurring in the same year because we have new assets for the water treatment plant. And then in the lower two graphs, we see the combined annual and then cumulative capital and operating costs. And then very quickly, go one more slide. We take money away, we're spending less, we get a little bit of an operating cost reduction, but we haven't completely replaced the water treatment plant, and similar changes in annual capital and cumulative capital and operating costs. And then click once again, and here's the lowest funding level. We haven't been able to spend any of the money necessary for the water treatment plant. Operating costs continue to grow because we haven't made the investment in the water treatment plant, and we see the annual and cumulative costs. All right, so that completes the analysis of the water assets. Now we'll move on to the sewer and stormwater assets. Again, we have a combined view looking at all three funding scenarios, and very similar to what we see in water. Basically, the more money we spend, the lower the backlog, the more reliable the assets are, the higher the condition the assets are at the end, but very small changes in operating cost. So the big advantages of making the investment for water, for sewer and stormwater is improve reliability and improve condition of the assets. Next slide. Now I'll talk about the performance assets, performance measures for each of the scenarios. Next slide. So here's the highest funding scenario. The backlog continues, but diminishes in scale until we get to 2036, and then it goes away. Reliability generally improves over time. Facilities condition improves over time. And all of the assets are at a state of good repair beginning in 2037, which is the year in which the backlog drops to zero. Now we'll take money away, going from $9 million a year, click again, to $6 million a year. And we see that the backlog is substantially higher toward the end of the analysis period. In fact, at $6 million a year, the backlog's ending just about where we began. So it's sort of a stable situation in terms of the backlog. But note that the reliability, that line is beginning to go up. So while we've stabilized backlog, reliability is getting worse at this lower funding level. And we see effectively no change in the condition for facilities, and the percentage of assets at a state of good repair is always lower than 100% because we always have a backlog throughout the entire analysis period. Now let's take some more money away. And so click again. So this is an even lower spending level. The backlog goes up even more. Reliability goes up, meaning it's getting worse. And not much change is happening in terms of condition and percentage of replacement costs at a state of good repair. So those are the performance measures. Next slide. Now I'll talk about the spending measures very quickly. Next slide. Spending at $9 million a year, we see the mix of spending. Not much really information there, but other than $9 million a year is giving us plenty of money, and in fact, in some years is more than what we actually need once we're way in the out years, but balances are carried forward. The operating costs just continue to increase. Next slide. As we take money away, we see a small increase in O&M costs, so it's getting a little bit worse. And then next slide, take even more money away, the operating costs are going up a little bit more. Okay, so that's the summary of the findings for sewer and stormwater. Next slide. There was some interest on the part of the Public Works staff to get an understanding of what's going on in just the sewer assets and just the stormwater assets because they're in separate enterprise funds. So here's a summary of the cumulative capital and operating costs for sewer on the left, stormwater on the right, and not much I can say about it other than as we spend more money on capital, we're spending more money, but the performance of the assets definitely improve as we spend more on the capital program. Next slide.
I'm gonna interrupt you just right
Yep.
there. Great information. We are tracking. We appreciate it very much. But if we could jump back to Mr. Clark, and then if council and/or the community has any additional questions on the 3 different levers, we can, we'll meet you outside in the lobby. Thank you so much.
Thanks again, Graham Clark, Finance Director. We can go to our presentation, slide 29. Curtis, thanks. By the way, money's not falling from heaven. That caught my ear. I wish. As you know, this marks the second year of the 5-year rate plan that we've established. We're pleased to confirm that the previously shared rate projections of 15% increase communicated to the public last year at the fall of 2024 remains the current recommendation. This water 5-year forecast shows us with a positive fund balance or working capital throughout the next coming years. Note that we do have URAF stopping after the 2025. That's the red number. Next slide. Here's our projected 5-year fund balance for sewer. We project needing to issue bonds again for phase 2 of the wastewater treatment facility in 2031 or 2032, which is why you'll see a larger fund balance than some of the other funds as we prepare for this phase 2 issuance, which will be primarily cash funded. Next slide. Here's our projected 5-year fund balance for reuse. This is a difficult fund to raise revenue, and it's by far the smallest fund, but you can see we do have adequate days cash on hand into the future. That will certainly change with some of the information that Ken talked about regarding the Becky property and some of the tow drain issues that are there. Next slide. So this is our first look at the new stormwater fund. You can see that 2026 working capital, or the fund balance at the very bottom, is down to $1 million in 2026. We feel confident that the 9% increase in stormwater is sufficient this year, as we then see the ending fund balance go up each year thereafter. At this point, most 99% of the operations in CIP have been moved out of the sewer fund and into the stormwater fund. Next slide. So the rate increase recommendation includes updated information from 2024 financial results, the successful launch of the stormwater fund, the capital improvement planning supported by the AECOM recommendations. And again, the only exception to the previous projections based on the current analysis is that the stormwater can go to 9% versus the previously projected 15%. Next slide. Here's a look at future rate increases out the next 3 years after 2026. The intention is to be in the single digits going forward after 2026. You can see that each of those rate increases will be part of the budget adoption process in each year of those budget years. Next slide. The following are just some key dates for economic updates and the budget and rate adoption in October. And lastly, next slide, staff is requesting council's confirmation to proceed with the proposed 2026 rate recommendations at the first reading of the 2026 budget on October 14th, 2025. In review, the financial position of the enterprise funds are improving as we remain committed to transparency. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you all so much. We're going to go to council questions and comments next. Who would like to go first? I'm sure we have lots from that voluminous presentation. Oh, Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll jump in. So a missing piece that I missed. So from the AECOM scenarios that we saw, the high, medium, and low, we then have the rate increases that were proposed by staff. How do those rate increases line up with those three different scenarios? Is the rate increases, are those reflective of that high scenario, or where do those, what is that connection there?
The high scenario, and I would emphasize again that the analysis focused on replacement of existing assets in kind. So we're not talking about any expansion expenditure.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Mr. Rutt, if you would come up to the podium. So based on the 3, the 6, the 9, where are we in the 3, the 6, the 9 now and moving forward?
Again, Ken Rutt, Director of Water Utilities. Yeah, what we've been projected on, just like after the 24 study, that we've been working with Graham and the finance team to move towards that 6 million in water and 9 million in the sewer fund.
When are we projected to be at those levels subsequent to the 2025 increase or subsequent to the 2026 increase?
It'd be into the new increases.
Did you have anything to add, Mr. Clark? Or are you just getting ready for the next question?
That was the correct answer. And now I'm ready for the next one.
Great job, Mr. Rudd. All right, Councilmember Delgadillo.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I have one question, which is around what does it look like practically to have a change of one additional break per 100, whatever the unit was? I'm just trying to understand when we see on the graph an increase of 1, is that a big deal? How should we conceptualize that?
Like all things with water, it depends. It depends on where that line breaks. Is it a major 30-inch, 36-inch pipeline that takes 36 hours and hundreds of people are out of water? Or is it a smaller break? So it kind of depends on the risk analysis piece, which is how many folks are impacted and the frequency of that impact.
Okay, that's good to know. So it's kind of difficult to assess. That's very helpful. And then another thing, I had a question about the AECOM model. How was the weighting determined? So it's like the 60% risk, 10% age condition, 30% cost benefit. I will say that I would roughly assume risk is the most important factor here, but is that an industry standard breakdown? What's that?
I don't think there's any standards, but certainly consideration of risk is consistent with national global standards. If you look at the International Standards Organization, Standard 55,000, which is addressing asset management, our consideration of risk now versus what we did previously brings us more in line with professional standards.
Okay, that's helpful. And then my other question was going to be, this one's a little bit more out of curiosity. And then why was our first scenario actually the weakest predict, or the smallest lever in the model, which was that 10% age condition performance. I mean, it sounds like we were iterating.
Well, it was an initial attempt, relatively limited time to do the analysis, limited amount of data. With this additional analysis, we had a lot more data, not just more data line items, but we had a better understanding of the number of households affected by each line item in the analysis. And by doing that, we had a way to measure risk, whereas before, because we really didn't know the number of households affected, we didn't have a good way to measure risk.
Okay, that's helpful to know. So that's the reliable predictor that we had at that time. I think, let's see, how much more model interrogation do I want to do? Maybe just one more question so that I don't lose the crowd. But I had a question about the asset decay curves. Are those for each asset? Is that for the system overall? And then if it's for each asset, how is that combined? How's that weighted?
We have a set of asset decay curves by asset class. We have a set of decay curves for pipe and for pumps and for water treatment plants and buildings. So it's not individual line item, it's more asset class specific.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Well, thank you for that, and thank you for the time, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Nguyen.
Thank you, Mayor. Great presentation, y'all. Again, appreciate y'all coming out here. A couple questions I have. First one is about the Chimney Hall Reservoir with the news about the uranium national deposits. Is there any concerns or any issues with that discovery? I mean, obviously, when I hear about that, it makes me feel queasy, but I understand that there might be some non-issue issues with having natural uranium.
It's, again, thank you for the question. It's similar to a lot of other minerals that we see in the raw water, right? So you got various components that come out of the soils or rock or whatever the water comes in contact with. So uranium, basically, our conventional water treatment plant can remove anywhere from 85 to 95% that comes in the raw water. You can get some higher removals based on some advanced techniques, but basically it is a treatable substance because it's not the radioactive material, it is actually the mineralized uranium.
Thank you. That helps a lot. Next question is on, Broomfield is a growing population. And I guess my next question is, with the rates and the reliability, does that keep track of population growth as well? Because Broomfield's population could be very much different in the next 10 years. Is there any concerns, or will the reliability services will still be the same if population growth is a factor?
Not exactly sure I got the complete gist of the question, but from a operational and maintenance perspective, yes, the ability of the staff to continue monitoring and performing and producing the water and maintaining the water lines doesn't vary based on the population. It's more on our available funding and our opportunities to provide the staffing, the materials in the construction.
That answers my question, because, my thing is that obviously when we see a population boom or growth, which goes to my next question is, with continuing issues with services reliability, how do we measure making sure that the guidelines for these, reliability for population growth is impacted? So is there like a way if a certain area grows more, is that going to be, addressed sooner or later, or how's that impact?
So when we did the evaluation, working with AECOM, one of the things that we, enhanced and improved working with our GIS team is we've identified every pipeline, how many houses, where those houses are located, what ward that is served in the community and compared those risks and all those factors within the modeling to determine where those things, where the corrections need to be made or where's the asset management techniques need to be applied to. And so all of that is part of the annual evaluation. We would continue to evaluate each section based on the same risk criteria that was established in this model.
Those are my questions. Thank you so much for the presentation and the answers. Thank you, Mayor.
Right, thank you. I'm going to go to Councilmember Lim first online. She had her hand up.
Thank you. I noticed the 15% increase for next year is applied a little differently than the increase we had the previous year, because last year the increase was applied just to the base rate. And now we're looking at the 15% increase to the base rate and to the usage rates. So could you describe, was there any conversation about if that increase should be applied to both the base and usage, or if it should vary somewhat in intensity between the base and the usage? Thanks.
Yeah, generally, when rates are applied, the standard practice is to do the percentage rate increase on both the usage and the base rate, and that's what you'll see going forward. Last year was more on the base, just to make sure that that revenue stability was there. Now that it's there, the increases will be going forward both on the usage and on the base rate.
Okay, thank you. My next question, I'm not clear on the usage of the stormwater fund going forward. So at the beginning of June, we had a project, it was City Park Stormwater, some kind of project, and 6/3/25. And it had to do with stormwater. And I asked during that meeting if the stormwater funds would be used for that project. And staff wasn't clear on that at the time. So I'm still a little confused as to at what point will the stormwater fund be used solely for the stormwater projects?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for 2025, we primarily had the operations and maintenance in the new stormwater fund. In 2026, we've then moved over all the CIP projects. So at the end of the 2026 budget, it'll be a fully financed fund standing on its own.
Okay, thank you. The future of the reuse water. So the reuse water has questions because of the Great Western Reservoir tow drain problems and other miscellaneous problems that could be very expensive. And reuse water also, we're not going forward with the reuse tank in the northern water tanks. So do both of these problems here where we don't quite have certainty on reuse water, are we headed in a possible direction where we won't have any reuse water at all at some time in the future?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Lim. Our current plan obviously is to evaluate all of our options available to us. The one option that we have not discussed at very much length is a facility called the Height Pit, which is located around the Fort Lupton area in Weld County. That provides us with opportunities to augment additional waters that we could use within our current Colorado Big Thompson water to offset some of the uses for reuse. So we have some options, and that's part of the study to evaluate what is our best option moving forward and how to maximize our water rights available to us and reuse. So the current plan, why we didn't need the north area tank, is that we are able to meet our current demands through our abilities to supply either through the reuse pipelines or through some irrigation ditches for some of our other customers, like Holy Family, Broadlands, Safeway areas. They all use raw water, and that's part of our reuse system.
Okay, thank you. In the memo, there was described the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund, which would be federal funding that would lower the interest rates for bonds. Are we considering that funding for the northern water tanks, or is that for the bigger projects like the wastewater treatment plant? And how much would using that funding from the Fed delay the projects?
Councilmember Lim, right now we're in the analysis phase. Since we've been looking into it for the last 6 months or so, let me say that it's mostly on the water side. So the water tanks, there's not very much funding available for the wastewater expansion. So that does not play into it at all. It was mostly on the water tanks. In the 6 months that we've been analyzing this, the funds have become more scarce. And it's looking more and more like we will not be able to, it won't make sense from a financial standpoint to go forward with this. It adds about 10% to the cost because there's a lot of federal regulations when you make it a federal project. So it's like buy American and American steel. It adds about 10%. That roughly seems to be in our analysis that we completed last week about the gains that we would have. So it looks like it's probably not going to be feasible, but or it won't make a whole lot of sense in terms of the cost benefit analysis. But we have researched it well for the last 6 months. At this point, it doesn't look like we go forward. At the time of the memo, we were still uncertain. But at this point, it doesn't look like it's going to make much sense to go that direction because we were not going to gain as much as we're going to offset with the additional cost with the federal requirements. And so at this point, we probably will not move forward with that unless something changes in regards to the available funding over the next month or two.
Okay, thank you. Last question, Sienna Reservoir. I've had residents ask, when do we expect that the pump station will be completely operational? And there was a very specific question from a resident about is there fishing in the lake still, because they saw that there were a lot of weeds left at the bottom before the refilling of the lake.
Thank you for the question. The Sienna Reservoir is operational and complete. As far as the structures go, we are doing the punch list items and going through the landscaping and those final checks of the project. We expect all of that to be completed by the fall, where all the landscaping will be in place. We have added 2 what we call LG Sonic algae reduction units to help ensure the water quality in Sienna. There was an operational decision not to spend the money to do weed abatement before we filled it. And so, yes, we did fill it with the weeds at the bottom of the reservoir.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. And next is Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, AECOM and staff for all of your presentations. I actually feel like this was the data that I had asked for last time. And so I like to dive into the data. I also will admit some of it is just, tough to digest. So I'll make sure that I look at it and understand it fully. I will say that, all of those assets that we learned that we had, I think it took the time to understand that we had all of those assets. And in fact, tonight, I'm sure we've mentioned it before, but the Becky property, I don't think I've heard of that property before. Maybe we have, and I just forgot. So it's nice to know what assets we have, but as Spider-Man's uncle said, with great rights comes great responsibilities, right? So we have these assets, but we have the responsibility to take care of them. So I appreciate all of this. I did have a question about the Becky property, and would that make a dent in the reservoir fixes, and would that make a dent in that?
Every little bit helps when you're looking at the reuse fund, but depending on what the offer would be and whether or not we would accept it and move forward and bring it to before you, it's roughly between probably 7 and 9% of the repair cost.
All right. Thank you. I'll probably have some follow-up questions about that and just about maybe the future value of that property versus the value of investing it in the reservoir. Do we have a financial contingency plan for, let's say we have a recession or the bond market conditions worsen or federal loans are delayed or denied? Is there any sort of contingency plan for that?
No, at this time, we're we talked to our bond counsel, our financial advisors. That doesn't seem like an imminent threat right now. So at this point, we are still planning on the January timeline.
Okay, thank you. They tend to know those timelines way better than we all do, right? Thank you. And then just sort of my last questions, what are the various efforts? So I see all these different parts moving. I still feel like there's little pillars that we're still seeing. So asset management, we have organizational restructuring, we have wildfire preparedness. So we've read through all of that. In the capital planning, what are we doing about integrating it into a single strategic framework that aligns with our priorities as a council? And then how do we track this alignment over time? Or is that probably the next step beyond just, the increase in water rates?
Thank you, Councilmember Hinkle. Great questions. As we continue to move forward with the overall strategic planning for the city and county of Broomfield, the water is one of the key pieces, whether it's financial sustainability within the water funds or whether it's the ability to maintain our asset management. All of those will be pieces and considerations in some subsection of that strategic plan. It's also in coordination with the water utility overall strategic direction is a process called One Water, where you take a holistic look at the complete water system within Broomfield from the Northern Water Supplies to the Denver Water Supply and all the infrastructure that's in between and how each one of those are interlaced and combined and are reliant on one another. And how does that play into the overall strategic planning of not only providing the water and the infrastructure for today, but for tomorrow?
Thank you for all the detail today. I really appreciate it. And this is not the last conversation, obviously, about it. So thank you, staff. Thank you, AECOM.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. It's always entertaining to me to hear the questions from someone like Councilmember Delgadillo with her left brain. out of the University of Chicago, and I'm more on the right brain side. I'm more creative. I want options. So to that end, and to follow up on what Councilmember Henkel was pursuing, I'm interested in all the different, you must have considered multiple options because things are so chaotic in terms of the economy. We don't know if recession, tariffs on and off. We know in 10 months, the Federal Reserve Board chair retires and the new Federal Reserve Board will be not independent. So, I mean, there's all these different factors going ahead that you must have, I mean, how did you come down to your one scenario? And are there options to consider if this happens or that happens, how we could respond or how we should take that into consideration?
Are you talking specifically about rates?
Your scenario looking forward, your projections, like the bonding at that time, I mean, for sure, will that be the best time, or what other factors you take into account? Just considering, it's always hard to project. You know, it's always amusing to me that when we have monthly job reports, we always compare it to what the economists project, and the economists are always wrong. But yet we continue to base it against what the economists project, even though they never get it 100% right. But so I guess I'm just looking for, what other options did you consider? Or is this the one and only path we have to take?
Well, we've looked at a few different scenarios, but this is by far the most viable. You're right. There's a multitude of things that can change. The bond market could change. Obviously, we could probably have gone maybe a 1% lower, but then we came in with the precipitation this year, and we know that those revenues are down, and so we know that's going to affect kind of later on in the year when we get the overall revenues for the year. So taking into account all those factors, the 15% for water, wastewater, and storm, or for water and wastewater and reuse, still put us in the best position. I would say that we kind of go down to our lowest amount that we'd want to go to in terms of fund balance in water and reuse. And then sewer, of course, we're trying to plan for the 2031 to 2032 bond at the same time. And so we thought that was a good amount in order to keep us progressing towards that.
So in some ways, we're hoping for a dry summer next year. Or we'll have to adjust if we keep getting these wet summers unexpectedly. I guess, what I was thinking when you said 15%, the movie The Sandlot came to mind. You're killing me, Smalls. More, more on more. We just did a huge increase. And so I'm curious on two things. Was there an option of not doing 15% right out of the door, but raising those following percents just a little bit more? So it's not quite the hit again, the double-digit hit. And I know you said we have single digits going down the road, but is there a way to avoid such a big hit right after having such a big increase? And two, did you also budget for a continuation of the relief fund we set up, but perhaps more narrowly focused? Because if we take it away completely, some of those folks at 30% AMI particularly are really going to get hit hard since they didn't really feel the increase this past year.
Yeah, so for the first question, for the 15%, there's a reason we do the 15% early, because it then compounds on those outer years. And so it actually helps to do it earlier than later for that reason. Your second question, can you say that one again?
Regarding the relief fund we set up which did you budget for? Yeah, I think you mentioned in the presentation, as it was planned for 1 year. But was there any budget for continuing that, but perhaps more narrowly focused, 50% or 30% AMI, the people who are most at risk, for not being able to pay their water bill?
Yeah, so right now, in terms of what we kind of decided last year was going to be 1 year, I think that's more of a policy decision in terms of if you guys want to, if council wants to continue that, but we do not have it in the budget as right now.
So is that something, I think going forward, that's something, I can't speak for all my colleagues, but may want to consider, especially not for 100%, but certainly folks at maybe 50, 30% AMI who could go from 0 to 70 in 1 year as the effect of that 1 year falling off that quickly. That's all for now, Mayor. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I still have a couple of questions after all these other great questions, but I just want to clarify because I've received some questions out of Anthem Reserve because now they're anticipating the North Area water tanks being built, and those are says they're still on track for construction in early 2026. And then the reuse tank, I know Councilmember Lim started to ask about that question, but is that the last update I found was that that would be determined as part of this 2026 CIP budget process with an estimate of like 2030. Is that still accurate information? Or when do we need those tanks, or when do we, sorry, not those tanks, the reuse tank?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Anderson. I think in the January update, we provided the modeling results that we had our engineering firm, Arcadius, evaluate the reuse system. And how could we supply the needed pressures and volume throughout the city and county of Broomfield's users, and whether or not we needed the northern water tank for reuse. That modeling revealed that we do not need that northern tank. And so we did not budget for that in the 25 or 26 budgets, and are not planning to build it since the modeling shows that it is not required to meet our demands.
Okay, so that wouldn't be 23. That's just like not required at this point.
It's not
Okay.
required.
Okay, I was trying to dig back to where that was. So thank you. I'll look back at January. Okay, thank you for that piece of information. And the other two tanks, the potable water tanks, are still on track for construction in early 2026.
Yes, our plan is to continue the bond, we'll come for you in January or December to, once the budget's approved and the bonds proceeds are to be advertised and work through the finance end of the bonds. We plan on starting construction in roughly January to begin the construction of the water tanks.
All right, thank you. And then my other question was related to those Becky shares, which I don't think I've ever heard of either. So is this solely for the purpose of raising funding for the dam repair, or are these shares just not useful for Broomfield?
So in February 2000 of February, City and County of Broomfield purchased the Becky property for mainly the amount of Colorado River water that we could purchase, the 254 units. So we're not recommending, or do we have a desire to sell the Colorado River water? We are maintaining that river water, these shares that we have from the Colorado Big Thompson project. What we're proposing is, since we're not going to use the land, because originally the land was going to be mined for sand and gravel and then possibly used for water storage. Since that time, development has grown both in Broomfield and in Erie, and that makes building a pipeline from there to here a little more difficult. And in addition, we are recommending that the Broomfield Reservoir be built instead, and we'll use the Broomfield Reservoir as the water storage vessel rather than mining the Becky property, which would take 10 to 20 years to mine that out and move, because we need the Broomfield Reservoir. We need it sooner, and that's the direction.
Okay, so just simply land, nothing?
Yes, just the land.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that clarification.
All right, thank you. Any other first round? All right, Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So just looking at this, the funding recommendations down at the bottom. So staff recommends the high funding scenario, which AECOM laid out. And there seems to be alignment with that for that fee structure that is set up for 2026 and those future rate increases up until 2029. Looking at the 2026 rates for sewer, water, and stormwater, on the average utility bill that was displayed last year when we went through rate increases, the utility bill was for 9,000 gallons on water, 6,000 gallons for sewer. And we saw the average bill increase from about $80.05 to $119.90, or an average of about $39.85, which we talked about, that $40 increase. Looking at the these 2026 rates proposed, it would increase this average bill to $136.79, or a difference of $16.89. So essentially less than half of that increase that we saw a year ago. So it seems to be that there are three different funding scenarios. There seems to be a decision for council to consider kind of the short-term consideration of lower rate increases. Thus, we would look at that low funding scenario. And what that would do is that it would kick those major decisions to future councils, as well as have very high increases, it looks like, for future residents or current residents that are older, as well as unreliable infrastructure. So I think that, I would concur with staff's proposal to make the best decision for Broomfield's current and future by adhering to the proposed rate increases that staff has outlined. So thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
All right, thank you very much. So are you asking for some type of direction tonight, or is this just an update?
Just an update.
Okay.
As we move into the full budget conversations in addition to the enterprise funds, it's important for you to have this study session. We'll have subsequent study sessions regarding specifically the budget with the presentations. We'll also have public comment on those budget presentations and then combine both of those. Again, when we presented last year, it was a 5-year plan. This is year 2 of that 5-year plan. All of the AECOM generative projections, as well as the backlog, the speed with which we can do it, understanding of the asset management is based on that 5-year plan. So it's not a year for year plan. So to Councilmember Cohen's point about making those modifications and or running various scenarios kind of on the what ifs, it's the domino effect on the what ifs. So it's if council provides direction that they want scenarios run, it would have to be applicable to each one of those categories: storm, water, sewer. Councilmember Lim brought up the variables that is in each one of those accounts. So thus the application of the overall recommended increases.
Right. So because of the, decades of not raising the rates up to a level that was required, we have a considerable backlog. Is that what I'm getting? Because that seemed like we were starting to tackle the mountain of projects, especially stormwater projects that were not funded because it had to come out of the general fund. So it looks like you're making a lot of progress on the pond maintenance and the algae and stuff that we've been getting so many concerns about.
Thank you, Mayor. That is true. We, as the last year's rate increase and the addition of the stormwater fee has provided us opportunities to begin that process. Like I say, we're just begun the process, and this is the next step. And over the next the 5-year plan, each step takes us further into achieving those goals.
Well, I do appreciate the robust presentation and just hearing about all of the projects that you guys have in the pipeline, no pun intended. And really it shows the community as well how much you're doing to address neglected infrastructure and to ensure that we don't have these really expensive pipe breaks like we were. So just thank you all. Thank you all so much for your intentionality with this, and more to come.
Mayor, could I say one thing,
Sure.
just to clarify for the manager? What I was trying to get at was best case, worst case. So if things go south, what kind of decisions do we have to face? Because we're looking at potentially a lot of much higher consumer good prices potentially in the next year, and that's going to impact residents heavily, in addition to a water rate increase. And best case scenario, that perhaps we weather this and the bond market looks even better than expected, or we have a drought, and our water bill rates and revenue goes up. But it would be helpful to know what the range is, rather than just this one choice. And what if we went with 10%, what impact does that have? And to Mayor Pro Tem's point, I think it'd be very helpful for you to come back with sample bills of what the different scenarios mean, so that people can fully understand that, you know, if we did 10%, yes, that means you're probably gonna have a higher bill year 2, year 3, but these projects can be done, or we may have to delay these projects because we're taking a lower percentage. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes, and so given that some of the structure is set on, if we could follow, since we already have the model, and I'm thinking out loud here, Councilmember Cohen, if we could follow the 3 million, 6 million, 9 million, right? So if worst best case scenario is that we continue on this path with regards to not only the backlog, but again, it's the domino effect of, it's not just one implication. So running those scenarios based on those 3 various levels, knowing that we're at the mid-level now, let us see what we can do.
Well, just to Councilmember Delgadillo's point, she raised the point risk.
Yep.
And that's what, one of the big issues is, you know, how much of a risk if we delay, risk to infrastructure, how many more water main breaks or interruptions to service we're risking by going scenario B. That makes sense.
It does make sense. And also to manage expectations, we are in the red right now. So our risk, even with the increase from last year, until we get into year 3, where we stabilize, we will continue to be not only at higher risk of failure, and that's why I want to stay with the models that we have right now and then just put additional information in rather than modifying those models. That will take a significant amount of time. We won't be able to have that prepared in a month as we're moving through the 2026 budget, but we can certainly apply the existing models with a few variables based on the 3 million, 6 million, and 9 million, and run what those risk allocation models could be.
Oh, okay. Councilmember Henkel?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, staff. Yeah, I would like to reiterate that even if we need to look at this more closely before that, the budget meeting, because we know that I feel like we do want feedback tonight, but I also feel like there was more questions up here to add to it. So if we need, I hate to say this, but if we need to add like a meeting before we have more of a overall budget meeting, because it sounded like we did want more feedback tonight. But if we need to add a meeting just specifically talking about this, I feel like it's important. So talking about that risk as well. So thank you.
Comments, questions from council? All right, well, I want to thank you all and my colleagues for the discussion, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from you guys soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item this evening is a discussion regarding the 2026 boards and commissions recruitment process. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to begin the discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. And she's injured.
Oh, her wings hurt.
Crystal Clemens is our city and county clerk, and she's going to introduce us and walk us through this item. Ms. Clemens.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. Next slide, please. The 2026 boards and commissions recruitment is around the corner. Tonight, we will review the marketing campaign, application process, and questions, as well as interview options. Boards and commissions recruitment occurs in even-numbered years. In 2026, council will be recruiting 13 boards and commissions with 73 positions to fill. We anticipate possibly more with additional vacancies later on in the year. Next slide, please. So the marketing campaign will begin in December with key messaging on multiple platforms, including Volunteer Hub. When we use Volunteer Hub, this goes out to 1,200 volunteers. So we'll also be adding a new option of an open house to provide the opportunity for the community to learn more about the volunteer opportunities for each board. Next slide, please. So in 2024, the application process was moved to Volunteer Hub. This software allowed staff to streamline the application process, track hours, and collect the forms. Next slide, please. In 2024, staff recommended one application for all boards, removing the board-specific questions, with the thought that the information could be gathered from resumes, any experience information needed. For the application, staff recommends name, address, ward, email, phone number, age, which is required to identify our youth applicants, which board or commission they're applying for, do they currently serve on a board, have you ever attended a meeting for the board you're applying for, and to briefly explain their personal and professional experience and why they are interested in serving on the board. Each applicant also has the option to attach a resume. Next slide, please. During the previous recruitment cycle, applicants were permitted to apply for multiple boards. This has led to several operational challenges. What we've seen is after the appointments, many applicants withdraw right away because it wasn't their board of first choice, which leaves a vacancy for the board for the 2 years. And then we also saw technical limitations, which you guys might remember last time with the dashboard. It had reached the data field limit, so this caused the system to not function properly. Next slide, please. So in 2024, as I said, several streamlining measures were implemented, and that included the elimination of the board-specific questions. And we also reduced the Spark Hire interview to a single question. And that was just focused on their interest in the board and their relevant experience. Next slide, please. So most recently, as you know, Spark Hire has been used for the interview process. Tonight, we'll be asking council direction of if you want to continue this process with the Spark Hire, if you would prefer in-person or no interviews, as well as do you want the Spark Hire interviews or in-person, whichever option is selected for quasi-judicial only or for all boards. Next slide, please. So here's our timeline for the boards and commissions recruitment. As I said, the marketing will begin in December. Our applications will open January 2nd. They remain open for a month and will close January 31st. We're anticipating the open house on January 15th, which subject to change just depending on schedules. And then in 2024, we also held the council meeting prior to a study session and only did the boards and commissions appointments. So we're also recommending that process again. Next slide, please. So for the 2026 recruitment, staff seeks direction from council. Does council approve the application questions as presented with the option of applying for one board and not multiple? Are there any additional question councils wish to incorporate into the application? Does council prefer virtual or in-person interviews? And will you want that for all boards or quasi-judicial only? And does council approve the proposed recruitment timeline as outlined? And that concludes my presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Clemens. We'll go to council for feedback. We can keep that screen up as a reminder. Who would like to start us off? I'll wait. Okay, thank you, Councilmember Anderson.
All right, thank you. Something I've noticed in the past, I actually appreciate the just going down to one question, because when we had to go through the 3 separate questions, sometimes it was a bit repetitive. Some people did like really short answers. So I'm fine with the one question, just you really want to hear that relevant experience. I get the comment in there that it makes some people a little bit uncomfortable with the Spark Hire interview. I like them because it gives you a sense of the person, but honestly, whether you do a 3-minute 3-minute interview, question, answer, or just, write 500 words, you're getting the same content. So I don't know if there's any consideration for we just need one or the other, because sometimes we get applications and there's just no information, and then it's really, really hard to understand, what that person is, why that person is wanting to apply. So just as long as there's some kind of content there. I remember doing the in-person interviews. And that was a lot of interviews. I know we sometimes, broke it up, but then we weren't seeing all of them. So I don't want to go back to in-person interviews. I either Spark Hire or just substantial comments. I'd be okay with either. And I think, and on the interviews for the quasi judicial boards only or all boards, I am open on that. I personally like the recorded interviews, but if we're losing candidates because of that extra step, I would be okay with just the quasi judicial boards. And yes to the recruitment timeline is fine. Thank you.
Excellent. Next, we have Councilmember Wynn.
Thank you, Mayor. To answer your questions, I do support the application questions as presented. I don't think we should incorporate other questions as well, just because, I'm a firm believer of making things simple and accessible, and some people, they might get lost in the sauce by getting more questions. So the questions look good to me. As for, interviews, I prefer virtual, but I understand that some folks do better in person. But I think, as someone who was interviewed back in 2020 for the Cultural Council, I preferred the virtual process. As for the second last question about the boards, I did read in the memo about how the streamlining measures were implemented. I think that's a good choice. I know some folks it said that folks were, when they got approved to secondary boards or low engage. I prefer the fact that members we appoint should be as engaged as possible. So interviews should be conducted for all boards, I guess. And then for the last question, the recruitment timeline works. I think it's a good timeline for early January. So those are my thoughts. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Delgadillo.
Thank you, Mayor. I approve of the application questions presented. There are no additional questions I think we should incorporate. I prefer virtual interviews. Interviews should be conducted for all boards, but I am open to negotiation on this one. And then I approve of the recruitment timeline. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go online to Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. So I don't have any issues with the application questions that staff presented. I don't have any additional questions that I'd like to incorporate into the application. I actually prefer in-person interviews, but I do know that that could be an impediment for some applicants. And so I think the option for them to do virtual would be allowable. And then I think interviews should be conducted only for the quasi-judicial boards. And then I think the recruitment timeline as outlined is great.
All right, thank you. Next is Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. I applied to open space back when it was in person before COVID. And I do remember that. And I do know as an interviewer, there's a lot of value to being able to ask a question to a person, get immediate impact. I can't imagine us choosing the housing and the health boards without those in-person sessions that we had. I think they were invaluable. So it's a time suck, I know. So that's a very unpopular answer. I think the best scenario would be in person. I don't know if we could compromise and, due to the problems with SparkNote, to do Zoom interviews as a possible way to make it easier for people, avoid the nervousness of having to film themselves, but give us an opportunity to interact with the applicants. As to your directions, I would drop the question about, have you attended a meeting? That doesn't give me any value to me. I think I answered the third one. I'd prefer in-person virtually, maybe a Zoom as a compromise. I would say all boards, and timeline is fine.
Thank you. Now, you did say we have a minimum of 73 vacancies to fill. So that could be at least 70 to 100 applicants to interview. All right.
The other option is you designate certain groups of people.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I used to do in-person
Yeah.
interviews when I first got on council. We had to schedule 3 extra days during the week and interview everyone individually for about 6 minutes. But think about it, you're adding 3 more evenings of just interviews.
I didn't say it was be popular. I'm just saying it's better.
Member.
The other option may be do we have to interview, is all of us have to interview every applicant, or do we assign ourselves to certain committees and do the interviews and make recommendations to the full council? That could be done as well. Thanks.
Councilmember Cohen, for clarification, you're saying interview all members or quasi judicial only?
Oh, I'm open to whatever the group agrees to. Quasi is probably the most important.
All right. Thank you. Next, Councilmember Henkel.
Creativity has entered the chat from Councilmember Cohen. Thank you for all of these questions. I do think that we could streamline certain parts and then expand other parts. I do approve the questions, but I'm also with Councilmember Cohen as far as people attending the meetings or not. That doesn't change my mind. No additional questions. So I would prefer if we said, okay, if you could do Spark Hire, that'd be great. If you want to do an in-person interview, then we split up people and assign them to certain areas. And then we can do just online Zoom. I feel like that would be easiest. I actually like sometimes if I don't see the interview, and I like to call them personally, but that's just me. I think people are different on paper sometimes than they are in person as well. And we need to make sure that we have some good temperament. Should interviews be conducted for all boards? I think so, yes. And I approve the proposed recruitment. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just wanted to point something out. So you had talked about the new open houses for boards and commissions. I think that's a great idea and a great piece to do there. I do also want to strongly suggest that applicants attend a board and commission that they're applying for. And so, possibly in addition to that open house, that is also something that is communicated to applicants is actually attending one of those board and commission meetings that they're applying for. I do like the change of the primary and secondary choices for those applicants as opposed to just a whole list, wanting to get applicants that want to serve on these boards and commissions and be excited about the board and commission that they're on as opposed to what we've seen as resigning early in those terms and leaving a vacancy. So I do like that change as well. So that is kind of what the application questions, I do like those. And I like those 2 little additions that staff has proposed. I don't have any further questions to incorporate into the application. I think that Spark Hire is a good opportunity for verbal processors to communicate those questions, whereas sometimes written is difficult for some people. So I don't know, would it be a major lift to make Spark Hire an optional communication tool for applicants to maybe answer one of those questions? Why are you excited about serving on this board and commission, so that someone could verbally do that with a video if they wanted to, but they aren't required to, and they could just answer a written application for those questions?
Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf, just to clarify, are you saying that they wouldn't do the paper application at all and
No.
just do Spark Hire?
No, they would do the written application, but then, they would be able to answer one of those questions, probably why you are excited about serving on this board and commission verbally as well, but that would be optional as opposed to a requirement.
I would say the heavier lift is on council because we just send the link. So we're on our end, sending the Spark Hire link is no huge lift on our end. The lift comes on you when you're watching those for 73 or 100 applicants that you don't think 3 minutes is long, but you start adding that many and it becomes quite a task. So that I would say it's not a problem for us to send to each applicant.
Okay, perfect. So that helps me answer my question, the rest of my questions. So I definitely don't prefer an interview at all. I don't think it adds a lot to their application. However, for those people that are verbal processors, I do think having that option to answer a specific question out there could be helpful for the applicant. I know that it adds time for us, but I wouldn't require an interview or a virtual, Spark hire to be answered by any applicants, including the quasi judicial board. And then I approve the proposed, or I approve the proposed recruitment timeline as outlined. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go online to Councilmember Lim first. Councilmember Marshall. Councilmember Lim.
Thank you. I do prefer the primary and secondary choices also. Councilmember Shaft mentioned that it's not in the questions, but I appreciated that we at least have a primary and then a secondary, especially for those like we need that secondary, at least that one, because something like the LURC board is where everybody wants to apply for that. Then we often take people and put them on a different board. Because we have too many applicants for a board like that. So I appreciate the primary and the secondary. Does council approve the application questions? Yes. No, there's no additional questions. I prefer virtual interviews for all the boards, and I approve the recruitment timeline. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I approve the application questions as presented, although I would add for the secondary, primary and secondary one also. No other questions. I prefer in-person interviews, but I want to, and only quasi-judicial, but I would think we should limit it even more. I would say that we should do in-person interviews for the Board of Health, the Housing Authority, and LURC. I don't think we need in-person interviews for the rest of them, but those ones I think are the very important ones that are making actually policy decisions. So I think those are important. And the timeline is good for me. So thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you very much. Councilmember Leslie.
Yeah, I support my colleagues' positions on it. I think virtual is probably more practical, but I agree with Councilmember Marshallson about the other two boards. I think personal interviews for those two boards would be appropriate, and I agree with the timeline. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Did everybody have a chance to weigh in? I think so. Were you able to capture enough consensus with those responses, Ms. Clemens?
I don't think we have consensus for the interviews.
Okay, we're gonna have to do a poll. You guys have to pick something instead of the vagueness. Can we vote? You can set up a little vote? Oh, good. Okay, we're going to, if you support the virtual Spark Hire interviews, cast your vote. Was your button pressed to talk, Councilmember?
I was just gonna, sorry, I was just gonna suggest, I like what Councilmember Marshallson proposed in terms of in-person for those 3, 4. I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't know if we want to adjust. I was just going to give a second to that if we wanted to put that on the list of things to consider.
Okay, well, we'll consider that first. Like that? Okay. So if you're in favor of having in-person interviews for the Board of Health, the Housing Alliance, the Housing Authority, and the Land Use Review Commission, go ahead and vote. Yes. Are we ready? Oh, it's frozen? Okay, who likes that? Raise your hand if you like that idea. 1, 2, Henkel, we're voting. This is for. Okay, so this is if you support in-person interviews for the Board of Health, the Housing Authority, Housing Alliance, and the Land Use Review Commission because they're policy-making board. 5. Oh, boy. Okay, so we got 5. Any online? Oh, we got 6, 7. Okay, so that was a 7 in favor of for in-person for those 3 boards for their policy-making. Makes sense. Okay. And then for the remainder, do you support the Spark Hire process for the rest of the boards? Okay, how about you guys in the ether? Spark hire? We can't vote, it's frozen. You have to do a hand vote. Spark hire. For the remaining boards. Okay, looks like we've got support for that. Now, the Board of Health and the Housing Authority, those fall off at different times. Those won't be with this batch. So we'll have to do those when they.
No, the way it was when they were established, even though they were set up at a different time, they still follow our recruitment cycle. So it will all be at the same time as all our boards.
Okay, cool. Good to know.
Yes.
So does that help now with the
That
rest?
does. I think we're clear.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Cummings, and thank you all for the conversation. Let's go ahead and, yeah, we're gonna.
So here's what I was thinking about when we were voting the last time was, since we don't always get the Spark hire interviews from all the candidates, is it possible to note the importance of, if you don't do the Spark, if you choose not to do the Spark hire, that the importance of actually filling out those questions? Because I've seen people who have actually, like submitted the response and then just read that response for the Spark hire interview. But I just want to make sure that when the candidates realize that when they choose not to do the Spark hire and choose not to really answer the question, that we have nothing to go on. I just want to be clear in that application that we need one or the other, but preferably the Spark hire.
We can work on the communication on the application to make sure that's clearly outlined.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you. Anything else before we move on? And in none, we're gonna go ahead and thank you. We're done with this. Let's go ahead and take our 10-minute recess. It's 8:11. We'll be back at 8:21. Thank you. Welcome back. We're continuing on with our study session, and our next item is our final item. It's a discussion regarding the Comprehensive Plan Community Advisory Committee recruitment process. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, and I'll ask Deputy Manager Burton Zeddy to begin the discussion.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Lynn Merwin will be presenting this item tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Manager Burton Zeddy. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Council, Lynn Merwin, Deputy Director of Community Development for Planning. Let's see, the study session builds on the most recent prior study session related to boards and commission recruitment, planned to begin in late 2025 and extending into Q1 of 2026. The focus of this presentation pertains specifically to recruitment for the Community Advisory Committee for an upcoming update to the comprehensive plan. Next slide, please. Just a little quick background for those in the audience in particular and who may be listening from home. Broomfield last updated the comprehensive plan and the transportation plan in 2016. The plans serve as an overarching guiding policy document for Broomfield, and we have typically updated these plans approximately every decade. So we're approaching the 10-year mark and are working on hiring a consultant to facilitate the update, with a formal launch of the public engagement anticipated to begin in 2026 with this advisory committee appointment. Although we will be bringing the contract forward later this summer for your consideration. Last year, as part of phase one, Broomfield contracted with a planning consultant to scope innovations and best practices in long-range planning in anticipation of updating the two plans in phase two. And then last November, staff presented to you all the results of phase one, including a preliminary proposal for the plan update, which included the formation of an advisory committee to help steer the direction of the comp plan and the transportation plan update. Council supported this proposal and asked staff to try and include youth representation on the advisory committee. So staff is seeking council direction or confirmation on a refined recruitment process for this community advisory committee for the comp plan. Next slide, please. So this slide summarizes a role, composition, and term of the advisory committee. In brief, the role is to provide feedback and guidance on the major updates to both plans. The committee would consist of 16 to 17 members as proposed, representing a diverse group of Broomfield residents, business owners, and others. The term would extend for the plan duration, which is estimated to take approximately 18 to 24 months. And the committee would typically meet in person, although there could be some virtual meetings, beginning in potentially late March next year, or more likely April, following their appointment by you all in March. Next slide, please. The committee would attend quarterly meetings in person for an estimated 1.5 to 2 hours per meeting. They would represent Broomfield in a courteous and professional manner and generally follow typical meeting norms established for the group. I won't go through each one of these. Next slide, please. The advisory committee, again, is anticipated to include 16 to 17 members. We have been proposing 5 members from the community at large, ideally representing a broad range of experiences, backgrounds, and interests to bring a variety of voices to the process. And we would follow the boards and commissions recruitment process for this cohort as currently proposed. Based on council feedback in November, we are also proposing 2 youth or teen members. They would be selected to ensure a multi-generational perspective, which was of interest to council back in November. The youth recruitment would also follow the board and commission recruitment process. But due to the 18 to 24 month term for the appointment, we believe these teens should be entering grades 9 through 11 in the fall of this year so that they could fulfill their term over the roughly 2-year period. I believe they also need to be a minimum of 14 years of age. And then finally, the third cohort would consist of members from existing boards and commissions. And so we identified, in November, we identified 9 boards. And since then, we've had a new board formed, as you all know, the FLOW, or Fiscal Leadership on Water Advisory Committee. And so one of the questions tonight is whether you would like to like us to extend an invitation to that committee to nominate a member. Next slide, please. So in terms of marketing or I'm sorry, this is the list for those of you who might want to revisit the list. This is the list of the 10 boards and commissions we would look to recruit from, and it includes the Flow committee at the bottom. Next slide, please. Let's see where we. So we would use various channels similar to the boards and recruitments to recruit the committee members. I think one of the key differences is that for the boards and commissions, staff would go out to each of the 9 or 10 boards this fall and update them on the plan, to update the comprehensive plan and provide them an overview of what the role would entail and invite each board to nominate a member. Next slide, please. These are the application questions. They're fairly similar to the boards and recruitments, but they're a little bit more, if you could go back, please, one slide. They're a little bit geared more towards the comprehensive plan in particular, but basically a couple questions. Why are you interested in serving on the Comprehensive Plan Community Advisory Committee? What do you think you can bring to the advisory committee? What unique experiences do you have that can help inform the future of Broomfield? And then we did include a draft position description for this volunteer role, and we asked that they have read and understood and accept the duties and responsibilities of the role. A couple other distinctions for students. They can attach a letter of recommendation from a teacher, a parent, a coach, another member of the community, and for the at-large applicants, they would attach a resume. And then we are asking for your input again on whether to require Spark Hire interview or based on the last study session, perhaps an in-person interview. So that will be one of the questions for you tonight. Next slide, please. This outlines the timeline. It's pretty much the same as for the boards and commissions, although in the fall, we will be going out to the boards and commissions to, again, explain the recruitment process is a little bit unique for them. So that would start this fall. Next slide, please. And this lands us on the page of our summary questions. So number 1, does council support the proposed application process? So it would include a nomination letter by the 10 boards and commissions recommending a member from each board to serve on the committee, an online application from any community members interested in serving, and an online application from any qualifying youth interested in serving. Number 2, does council wish to require Spark Hire interview for the at-large and youth members? And by extension, we could say, or in-person interviews. And then number 3, does council wish to add the new Flow Advisory Committee to the 9 other committees invited to nominate a member? And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ms. Merwin. We will get feedback from council, starting with you, Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. So yes, I support the nomination letter for the 10 boards and commissions. An online application for the community members interested, yes. And then the online application for the youth serving, I think that's great as well. I would prefer to actually do in-person interviews for the Spark instead of Spark Hire, just because this is such an important document that the city and county of Broomfield is going to be undertaking. And then I do think it would be important for the Flow Advisory Committee to be invited to nominate a member.
Well, thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I have a question on if you are serving on one of the boards and commissions and they're nominating members, if you're on that board or commission and you're not the nominating member, could you still apply to be on as one of the open 5 seats?
I'm sorry, could you restate it?
Oh, so if you already serve on one of our boards and commissions and you're not the chosen nomination, could you then go and apply to be
As an at-large
an
member.
at-large, yeah.
Yes, definitely, yes.
Okay, so the youth, assuming that most of the, like the nominations would be,
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt. We have a rule against that now.
Oh.
Yeah, we passed a rule that you can only serve on one board unless there's a 2/3 vote.
Correct, Mayor. So if they've, right now, this recruitment process will go on at the same time that our normal boards and commissions recruitment will go. Are you saying if they're currently serving on a board?
well, if they're nominated from those boards and commissions to serve on this board, could you?
If they're not the designated
Not
appointee from an existing board that you're targeting, because you want to have that sampling, she's asking if the other, I'm speaking.
Yeah,
I
and-
know what you mean.
I know, and I know what the mayor's saying is that you're not allowed to serve on two boards. And I guess my question here was coming from the angle of the youth. Because the youth would likely not be the ones that are recommended, yet they might be some of the best, like engaged to serve in that capacity. But I get what you're saying because you'd have to choose whether, if you were a youth serving on a board, you'd have to choose if you wanted to serve on that board or try to move to this committee. I know you're.
Well, I think the whole purpose is we want to engage the maximum amount of citizens and give as many opportunities for people to participate. And that's why we created the rule. I understand why you want a designee, but then you're kind of still, you're taking away opportunities from other people who don't have an appointment.
Right, and I was thinking specifically of the youth on those boards. Okay, so they'd have to choose whether they want to, if they're going to apply for this board, than to step down from the other board or
But
something.
it would be open to all the other youth in Broomfield who
Yeah.
are at least 14 and
Okay.
entering 9th through 11th grade. So
Okay,
there's
that's
still
helpful.
plenty of opportunity to recruit youth.
So the answer is basically no, you should not. If you aren't the designated appointee, you should not. That's not the right path to apply. Okay, no, that's helpful. Okay, so then on the answers to these questions, yes on all A, B, and C. I agree that the Spark Hire interview is okay, but no, based on our last discussion, in-person interview would probably be the way to go. Because it is a very important board, and yes to including someone from the Flow Advisory Committee. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Councilmember Marsh Holston.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes to all the questions, but I would also second Councilmember Anderson's in-person interviews suggestion. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Wynn.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes to all the questions, but for the interview process, I would prefer virtual. So, yeah, thank you, Mayor.
Spark Hire.
Yeah, Spark Hire.
Okay,
That's right.
that's okay. Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it was Councilmember Austin Ward who mentioned the in-person for at-large and youth members. So I would agree with that. 1A through C, yes. And then 3, yes. Thank you.
Could I clarify, are you saying yes to Spark Hire then?
No, I was agreeing with Councilmember Ward who said in-person interviews for
Okay,
at-large.
thank you.
Thank you.
Good point if you want to make it. Sorry, sidebar. Councilmember Leslie.
I support Councilmember Anderson's recommendations.
All right, ditto for that. Councilmember Cohen.
Same as Councilmember Leslie, I support Councilmember Anderson, but I had one quick question in reading the memo. Do we know if these board members want to serve on another committee? Is there any resistance to like, oh, sure, I'll serve on another one?
According to staff liaisons for a number of the committees, there is interest in the comprehensive plan coming up. And so I can't speak firsthand for those members, but the staff liaisons are indicating that they're very interested in finding out what's coming up and how they can participate.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Lim.
Yes, I had a question. This is a 2-year commitment. Will these board members be replaced if they leave the board?
So replace from the comp plan advisory committee specifically?
Yes.
The proposal in the staff report is no. If all the seats are filled, there's 17 members. So if we lose a couple members, it should be fine. According to our prior consultant for phase one, these committees are usually in the 12 to 15 member range. So we could afford to lose a couple through attrition over time if that occurred. So that's the proposal now, is to just let them fall off and not replace, but it's something
Would
the
the,
council could.
would the boards at least have a, if we use the board process of nomination, would the boards at least have a chance to nominate a different board member if their board member rep fell off?
Yeah, if that's something council would like, we can certainly adapt that way, no problem.
That would make sense to me. And there was an estimate in the memo of the time it would take. And as I recall hearing about the 2016 comp plan, there were subcommittees that formed and everything. Is that a possibility again with this new comp plan? And would that be a consideration in the amount of time it takes that's estimated in the recruitment process?
We had not planned for subcommittees to be formed. So through phase one, we understood that the prior comp plan was very heavily driven by the steering committee, the name in place at the time for that advisory committee. And the recommendation was to have a little bit more of a balanced approach with this advisory committee, but also staff and focus groups and other representatives from around the community. And so at this point, we had not planned on subcommittees.
Okay, thanks for that explanation. Yes to all those questions and in-person interviews. Thanks.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just wanted to clarify. So with the nomination letters for the 10 boards and commissions, what council would be agreeing to is that somebody, say from OSTAC, would be nominated. We would be allowing them to both serve on OSTAC as well as the Comp Plan Advisory Committee concurrently. They wouldn't have to resign, and they would thus serve on 2 committees at one time. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm fine with that. The other thing is the youth members timeline. So you had talked about this is probably going to be an 18 to 24 month process. What we would like is probably for 9th graders to 11th graders entering those grades in 2025. Looking at that timeline, somebody that was entering the 11th grade in 2025, they wouldn't know until almost the end of their 11th grade year whether or not they got on this committee. Year one would be almost at the end of their 12th grade. Thus, 18 months would be after they're out of high school. 2 years would be long after they're out of high school. So I have a concern about those 11th graders in terms of their commitment to be able to fulfill that 18 to 24 month process. So I don't know if that's something that we want to adjust, whether it's the 9th to 11th graders entering those grades in 2026, or if we want to eliminate the 11th graders from that pool.
Look at that a little more closely. Our timeline did shift a little bit at the late in the process as we were preparing the staff report. We had thought we would advance forward 6-8 weeks ahead of the boards and commissions recruitment, but for operational efficiencies, which totally makes sense, our esteemed management executive leadership asked that we align it with the boards and commissions in our proposal to you. So we lost a couple months there. And so I think if we have, let us think through that a little bit. Duly noted. And if we need to, we will scale back to 9th and 10th graders.
Okay.
But we were still hoping that the plan would wrap up in the late summer, early fall of 2027. So if they're starting in 2025 as a junior, You know, the exact start time is a little bit later into, into 2026, but we would still plan to wrap up in 2027. So I think it'll be okay, but we'll double check.
All right, thanks. And then the other thing was about the public engagement plan. So is that public engagement plan on just the recruitment of the advisory board committee, or is that a public engagement plan for the whole process?
It's for the whole process.
Okay, so it doesn't, so it talks about that there's going to be discussion between staff and the consultant for that public engagement process, which I think is great. Will there be a separate conversation with council while informing the public of the details of that public engagement process before that launches in Q1, Q2 of 2026? That wasn't on that timeline, and that's why I asked that question.
Right. Trying to remember, we have 3 to 4 check-ins with council planned through the process. And I'm trying to remember, we don't have one right now specifically on the public engagement plan. So looking ahead from right now, we're planning to bring the contract with the consultant forward. Late August is the current timeline. Assuming they are approved by you all to proceed, they would work on developing the public engagement plan over the fall. We were planning to provide monthly updates, starting more when the public engagement process starts formally in 2026. But we had not planned a check-in with council on the public engagement plan formally in a study session.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be a good addition to this, to kind of lay out what that public engagement looks like, not only for council, but also for the public to understand what their participation could look along the way throughout this process. That's all the question, or that's all the comments I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Delgadillo.
Thank you, Mayor. To answer the questions, yes to all of the items in the first one, A, B, and C. The second one, it sounds like we're getting kind of consensus that this is one that we ought to be in person, and I'm okay to go along with that. So I'm good with that. And then 3, yes for that as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other input? Councilmember Anderson?
I just want to add support for Councilmember Lim's recommendation on those nominations from the boards of replacing. I don't know if we need to, get other feedback on that one, but I also support that.
It's how many people are proposed for this board?
17 altogether with the flow representative, so 10 from boards and commissions.
Okay, so council will only be selecting 7 because the boards are going to put up their appointment, right? Kinda what I
Correct.
Understood. Okay,
Correct.
they'll
2
select-
youth and
they'll
5
select.
at large. Yeah.
Okay.
And then affirming the board's
Well,
recommendations.
they've
Yeah.
already been vetted
Yeah.
by council. 'Cause
Right,
There's
right.
already being, say, okay, cool. Well, thank you so much, Ms. Merwin. Anything else from my colleagues? Councilmember Anderson?
Oh, no.
Okay, good. Anyone else? All right, well then that.
Thank you very
concludes our
much.
conversation.
Appreciate it.
Hope you got good direction.
Yes, I did.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Thank you very much. And that concludes the agenda items for this evening's study session. We'll convene in our executive session shortly.